Welcome to The Point. I'm your host, Eric Mitchell. It's another great day here at To The Point. And in the news, we've heard it all of 2020. Well, we've heard it for like the last 10 years. Everything going on when it comes to the internet, security of the internet, malware, all these things that pop up on your computer and you're like, I don't even know what that means. And you've seen it in the news recently, folks. The AP just broke a story just the other day that the FBI sent out a warning that malware is going to be attempted to infect things like our healthcare industry. So being the responsible show that we are, and our amazing producer, Miss Jordan, went out and found some amazing folks for us to talk about what's going on. And the rumors that a new internet may be being started, and no, Al Gore is not behind this one. True story. So let's welcome, we have an amazing guest today from QuasiNet, the wonderful Chris Bijou. See, I'm so proud of myself getting through names here, folks. Let's welcome Chris to the show. Chris, welcome to the show. I got through the name of your company and your last name. I was so proud of myself. I got way too excited here. So welcome to the show, Chris.
Thanks for having me.
So let's lead off before we hop into your company. Let's talk about this breaking news that's come out. We've talked about security of our election. I mean, goes back to before 2016, but 2016, I think, really brought Cambridge Analytica is one of those that everybody thinks of. You know, Brittany Kaiser blowing the whistle on what's going on and what was going on there. Internet security, malware, everybody seems to want to attack us. We all are constantly updating our phones. Everybody's on the internet. Now, I remember like 2 decades ago, we were like, you know, most of the world is not on the internet yet. They barely have power. And now it seems, I think everybody has one of these. I mean, I've seen homeless people with them. I live in Portland, so it's a little different. Our homeless have phones. But you see people with this. So this new malware report, and also coming out of Wisconsin from the GOP, their GOP reporting 2.4 million or something crazy like that. So is the internet even safe? I'll just give that, I'll leave that off with that.
Yeah, well, in a way it's not, right? The internet will never be safe, partly because it was never designed to be safe. When the internet was started, back in really what we think of the internet today, it changed in about '89 when they had to fix the internet and build what they call the border gateway protocol. And it's how our packets move across the internet. And a guy named Matthias Bergstrom was really the guy that designed that protocol. He was up in Sweden, and he happens to be my chief science officer now. And he was the one that kind of fixed the internet back in '89 and '90. That whole group up in Sweden was an amazing group. One of the guys that were up there were the guys that did Linux. They were the ones that brought forth Bluetooth and, you know, the 3G, 4G, 5G standards globally. So this was an amazing group of young kids. They were kids. I mean, they were, you know, late teenagers, and the old guy of the group was, 25, So this was who designed the internet. But when they designed the internet, it was never designed to be something like we think of the commercialized internet. And so when they designed it in to transfer papers and to play games between universities and things, they weren't thinking security. And actually, Matthias tried to build in security into the internet back then, but they didn't want to do it because it was too expensive, too difficult. So they just said, oh, we'll just add it on later. So everything on the internet today is an add-on for security. There is no security built into the internet itself.
See, that's crazy because we don't think of that. But one of the things that we have heard, and we've talked about it on this show at length, is the digital economy. 2020, as we all know, COVID-19 has showed up, and depending on who you ask, it's either here to stay or it's gone already. It depends on who you ask. Some people say it's gone, even though we're seeing a spike in COVID. But digital economy, we see more people do it. A lot of people think of like Amazon and Walmart and how they've just done absolutely great on the virtual economy, but more and more people going to the digital economy. But a word that I'm very familiar with and a lot of other people are is deep learning. And of course, AI, artificial intelligence, which throws a lot of people for a loop. I know people are still struggling when we say we're putting something in the cloud, and still I find people who look up, not that cloud. So we've seen how digital economy, but now you're seeing AI, and I'm telling people AI is heavily involved in a lot of the things that we're doing. How do you see, I mean, you see it everywhere. There's sales companies doing it. There's this one guy I see on LinkedIn, I swear all he talks about is his AI process and his sales platform on AI. How much is deep learning and AI going to change the way we do business moving forward? Obviously, it's been heavily talked about for the last, I almost want to say the last decade is when I heard it. But of course, I come from the Silicon Valley, so I've been hearing about a lot of things long before others have. Just like you there in Salt Lake City, you guys are, you know, they call you guys the Silicon Slopes for a reason. So many that's in Silicon Valley are where you guys are at. So where are we going with AI? AI is going to change business, right?
Oh, you know, I'm glad you said that the digital economy has been around for a while, because it's actually been around for 12 years.
Yeah.
We started the digital economy about 12 years ago. So if you're working towards the digital economy, you're actually working backwards. We're beyond it. The problem, and the reason that things have stalled out, and when you mentioned deep learning, there is a deep learning has, you know, distinct limits. So you know, when you see like Tesla and the self-driving cars and the autonomous vehicles and the, you know, what's coming from GM and all that, it's amazing, right? Because they're using neural nets and they're using sensors to try to train the cars to know what to do. The problem is deep learning is not the same as autonomous AI, because autonomous AI is how your brain works. So think of a cortex of how your brain works, and it works in parallel. Whereas deep learning, you have to train it to do everything, basically. So if you don't come up with a certain scenario, let's say, you know, you've got a car driving down the road and there's a child that's walking on the side of the road, and it's unattended. As a person, you kind of slow down because you think, wait a minute, that, you know, little child could run out in front of my car. As an autonomous AI car, they have no idea, right? Because the neural net hasn't been trained for every single scenario that you can come up with, right? So in one sense, it's changing incredibly fast on how we're actually going to live day to day. And COVID, that you mentioned, COVID is driving some of that, because COVID is driving in this virtualization that you're starting to see. All of a sudden, everybody's going, wait a minute, we can't work from the office anymore. You know, just like we're talking right now. The problem with what we're doing right now is that somebody can break into this feed from us, or they could steal it afterwards, or we can work from someplace and then they can, you know, do a deep fake or alter it or whatever, right? So there's so much that's happening that's amazing, but at the same time, there's so much risk. The more we do with, you know, the Internet of Everything, the more risk we carry. Does that make sense?
That makes perfect sense, because that kind of goes off of, you know, we get so excited with smart cities and smart homes. I'm sitting in one. You know, our lights come on automatically. I control it from my phone. I love color lighting. I mean, we of course, I'm not going to say her name because she'll respond to me, and I don't want her to talk to me right now. But we have that product from that company from Seattle. Starts with an A, ends in an A, and you know, those are really exciting things, right? When you think of it, it changes our life, making lists, listening to music, asking for weather. I mean, we love it. Every one of them is in every room in our house. Literally, it's how we communicate. We have 2 teenagers, and that's the fastest way to get one of them, because their doors are shut and they're doing teenage things, and I'm not walking upstairs to yell for them. So she could do it for me. And, you know, my voice is really loud and they think I'm yelling at them. So, but that's like a disaster waiting to happen. That's what I've read that you're on the record for that. So, you know, explain a little bit more. How are these things which we think are conveniencing our lives? There's a lot of risk behind this. I mean, you mentioned somebody could hack this very show, what we record on, because we can't go into a studio. So explain a little bit more why we're at risk.
So when the internet was designed, there's 3 issues that were flaws in the internet, and they weren't flaws originally because you know, the internet was never designed for what we're doing with it, right? So Vince Cerf, actually one of the fathers of the internet, talks about this for Google and goes around and talks about it all the time. There's no built-in security, and it was never designed for billions of, you know, Internet of Everything devices to be connected to it. And the third one is it was never built with intelligence in the internet. The internet kind of just points stuff in a direction. It's amazing what it does, and it's amazingly resilient for what we're doing with it, because it's so far beyond what we're doing with it. But if you think about where we're taking this, it's so far beyond Siri or Alexa or anything. We're getting into, if you think of 7 stages, so there's 7 stages of reaching where we call autonomous or autonomous AI, and that's where everything's heading, and that's where all the money is. People don't realize this is the biggest transfer of wealth in history. I mean, if you look at Zoom, or if you look at any of the virtual intelligence companies, anybody that can help with somebody who's gone home, their stock price is just going through the roof right now, right? Yeah. But if you look at anybody who's doing a traditional business, they're in trouble, right? Because we're switching, we're flipping. The whole industry, the whole economy is flipping, but the internet's not prepared for it. And so about 10 years ago, this group that was down in they happened to be all in Vegas. They were from all over the world, and they were, you know, some of the experts in 5G and global standards, and the guys that wrote, you know, the border gateway protocol for the internet and that runs the whole internet. You know, these guys were all together at a conference, and they said, you know, if we don't fix this, especially the Chinese will be able to, because the Chinese run a different type of internet than we do, right? So they run a closed internet, so they can't be attacked the same way we run an open internet.
Yeah.
And they said, if we don't fix this, our whole economy is scary. I'll tell you the scariest thing nobody talks about. The scariest thing that could happen is that if someone goes after our utility industry and takes out our waste management. So suddenly, picture, you know, 1 in 4 houses in America, if they shut down the utility industry, picture all of a sudden 25% of the homes are having, you know, sewage backing up into their house. Suddenly you can't stay in place, right? Because you're going to have so much disease that's coming into your house. And it's super scary how easy that is. There was a thing that was done. It was the Homeland Security went through and looked at the whole utility industry, and they went through, there's 7,200 command and control centers across the U.S. And over the last 3 years, they've looked at all 7,200. All 7,200 already have malware on their system and already lost control at some point of their system. So the 2 great utilities we have is the internet and our electrical grid, and both of those are actually incredibly vulnerable.
When we come back for our next segment, Chris, and ladies and gentlemen, we have Chris Bijou here from Quiznet. We're going to talk about, we're talking about this one, which has my mind blown, but you know, losing financial in our utilities, that's heavy. But the big topic I want to talk about when we come back, we were touching on COVID, but from what I'm reading, we're not safe even with our healthcare. I saw that warning also come out from our government recently, that is very vulnerable, that people can do that. So, I mean, I'm not worried about people hearing the boring conversations we have in the Mitchell household through our devices. I'm more worried about my healthcare. I'm more worried about that being affected. We have a lot of people who depend on that. And also, I don't want sewage backing up in my house, so don't get me wrong. I want my utilities safe. But when we come back, our next segment, we are going to talk about privacy and secure information regarding HIPAA, right? We're all familiar with that, but we want to keep that safe. And what you're saying, and we'll tease this, what you're saying is our current internet doesn't keep it safe. So
it can't. It's actually physically impossible.
Awesome. So we come back from our next segment. We're going to talk more about that. Stay tuned.
Great.